I opened Jurassic World as one massive dinosaur ecosystem. In one gigantic enclosure, I house some of the biggest and most fearsome creatures to ever walk the earth. Whether it's through spectating thrilling dinosaur fights, or the Indominus Rex stampeding through the food courts, I knew that my guests were about to be seriously entertained. It's not a park, it's a ticking time bomb with gift shops. Will this be the ultimate prehistoric paradise, or the fastest park closure in history? Welcome to the madness, welcome to Jurassic World, the ecosystem. And to tell you this story, I'm going to have to take you back to where it all began, at Isla Nublar once more. Our journey begins on Isla Nublar, the same site of the original Jurassic Park and Jurassic World. Now those parks may have failed, but I was determined that mine was not going to suffer the same fate. I began by placing down a premium wide path that will be able to fit in all my esteemed guests, and then plop down an innovation centre and a rest room. It might not look like much, but now that we actually had an innovation centre, the guests were already flocking in. So what I continued to do was place down numerous guest attractions, such as a spa, cinema and mini golf course, because that is exactly what people want when they come to a dinosaur theme park, right? But in seriousness, my investors had only given me a measly $2 million to get this crazy park started, and thanks to my attractions, I was already now beginning to rake in the money, even if we were yet to actually house a dinosaur. I began to create the route of the gyrosphere, which would go all the way around Isla Nublar, and the guests were soon all balled up and ready to admire the lovely trees and plants that they had to enjoy. So it was probably time to get started on the big enclosure. For now we would keep it a smaller size, and obviously extend it the more species we added in. I placed down a hatchery and connected it up to my paths, but my first buy would be a pair of Amargasaurs from the Dinosaur Exchange, who were airlifted into their new enclosure and swung around, which I wasn't best impressed by. I followed this up by immediately buying a pair of Kentrosaurus eggs, which I would incubate nicely over in my hatchery. I also needed a science centre to hire my scientists, so I placed one down and then added in some water for my Amargasaurs, as I may have forgotten to provide some of that. I placed down an expedition site, and then the monthly finances came across my desk, and they were absolutely beautiful. It appeared that our state-of-the-art gym and spa facilities were really making the guests turn out in numbers. Oh, and I suppose those two dinosaurs that we had probably helped a little bit as well. And speaking of dinosaurs, it was time to buy some more. So in came the Draco Rex from the Dinosaur Exchange once more, and with 7 of these things being airdropped in, the park was finally beginning to feel a bit like a dinosaur one at this point. It was now time to hire some scientists to help me in the park. So I hired a couple of them and sent one of them off to the US to do some digging for fossils, and then I admired our lovely new arrivals as they got settled in. I even rode the gyrosphere briefly for a bit, but there wasn't too much to see just yet. So with that in mind, it was time to get some more dinosaurs. But first, a quick word from our sponsor, as this video is sponsored by Raycon. I was super excited when Raycon recently got in touch about sponsoring a video on the channel, as they are a brand that I've always wanted to work with for quite some time now, and when their everyday classic earbuds arrived, I was not disappointed. As an Everton fan, I went for the colour electric blue, and paired them with the blue water protective case, and I love the look of both of these items. But never mind the looks, because there's a whole lot more to these wireless earbuds than just that. They come equipped with active noise cancellation, which I really enjoyed particularly in the gym, and the sound quality is great, perfect for taking calls from our resident Spinosaurus over here. They also have multi-point connectivity, so you can pair them with 2 devices at once, and a super comfortable ergonomic design that stays put no matter what you're doing. It's a big check mark for Raycon from Merlin the Husky, I think it's safe to say. The 32 hours of battery life that the case comes with is super impressive, and the quick charge function, where 10 minutes of charging gives you 90 minutes of playtime, is also a very neat feature. If you are looking for a fantastic, affordable pair of wireless earbuds, the everyday wireless earbuds have you covered. And thanks to the folks at Raycon, by using my link in the description, scanning the QR code on screen, or going to buyraycon.com/rampy, you can get 20% off site-wide. By picking up a pair, not only will you be grabbing yourself a great pair of wireless earbuds, but you'll also be helping to massively support the channel. Thank you so much to Raycon for sponsoring this video. And next up was the Pseudoceratops, which was a nice addition that I had airlifted once more into the enclosure. I watched it get settled in, and after being happy that its needs were being met, I had a look at what we could do now to improve our Jurassic World experiment. It was clear that we still needed more dinosaurs, as none of our current ones were exactly star attractions, so I needed to keep that in mind. I also realised at this point that I hadn't placed down a response facility, and as we wanted this to be a proper park where the guests are taken into consideration, I probably needed to place one of these down. I also placed down a paleomedical facility to treat any injured or ill dinosaurs that we may have down the line, and believe me, we're gonna have a lot of them. Our fossils from the US had come back, so I extracted them and they came back as some Dryosaurus and some Camarosauruses. Next up, I released the Kentrosaurus into the ecosystem enclosure, and watched as it began to expand its territory, and did see that it was getting a little bit lonely. But before dealing with that, I extracted the remaining fossils, and then began the first expansion of our big enclosure. We were already filling up with dinosaurs, and we were going to need some more space, especially as it was of course only a matter of time before we began to add the carnivores. Once the enclosure was extended, I bought a few more Kentrosaurs from the Dinosaur exchange to keep our existing ones happy, and then just could not resist a mystery dinosaur buy from the exchange, as it could have been anything. In the end, it was a Poliocanthus, which was not a bad deal to be fair for the price that I had paid. I was then asked to do a spot of photography for some cash of course. As I went around taking pictures of our dinosaurs on the helicopter, I realised that we were starting to build up quite a healthy cash balance. Perhaps this whole dinosaurs in all one enclosure was the way to go. I took my money from completing my contract and then sent out a team to dig for compy fossils, which I extracted as soon as they were back, as this was going to be our first carnivore. First though, it was time to release another herbivore, and this is the Dryosaurus, another lovely and cute addition to our ecosystem. But for our Dryosaurs, they would have to adapt and find their territory quickly, as they wouldn't stay safe for long. I added some sand in and then released the compies. Despite being the first creature to be released that actually eats meat, none of our creatures had to worry about these compies devouring them, as they would be happy to eat from our feeders and just about be friends of everyone. However, the same could not be said for the star attraction that I was working on adding to my Jurassic world, which would be the Ceratosaurus. Once these eggs were all incubated and ready to go, I had my team travel them over to the newer, quieter half of the ecosystem, just so they wouldn't eat all of our dinosaurs right away, as the more species that we had in the park, the more the guests were happy. While the Ceratosaurs were being delivered, I cooked up a batch of Struthiomimus eggs and released them into our ecosystem. As I looked on the map, it was all coming together quite nicely now, with a host of different creatures, so I decided to extend the enclosure even more, and soon it would basically cover the whole park. Our Ceratosaurs had now arrived, and they were looking juicy, and my Jurassic World now had a new star attraction that the guests were flocking to see on the gyrospheres. And with one carnivore added, it was time to add another, or in this case rather a piscivore, as I bought some baryonyx eggs from the Dinosaur exchange. While they cooked up, I got the enclosure ready, including of course adding some precious fish in for them to snack on, and then released our newest creatures into the ecosystem. I named one of them Alan, so hopefully it doesn't learn how to speak, and then I got them all settled in. I decided it was finally time to increase the enclosure all around the park, and our ecosystem was now absolutely massive, with a ton of room for all our creatures to spread out in and find their very own safe haven. For now at least. But anyway, so far this crazy experiment was turning out to be a roaring success. The guests were absolutely loving the chaos and all the amenities, seemingly not caring about the slightly unethical side of it. The dinosaurs for the most part were actually behaving themselves, but I was determined to grow even more, and next up came the Dilophosaurus. This dinosaur, thanks to all its cameos in the Jurassic franchise films, would be a real hit with the guests. And as I had 8 of them, I decided to put them in a nice quiet corner of the ecosystem for now, where they could rule on their own. Of course, I knew this would not last forever. I noticed the baryonyxes were not fully content with their territory, so I added some rocky terrain to their section of the ecosystem. Further up the enclosure, one of the Ceratosaurs had already begun to hunt. I watched as it chased down a poor Dracorex, and this small creature just had no chance, as the Ceratosaur claimed the very first kill of the ecosystem, and the first of many to come. As a result, I decided to name it Menace. Returning my attention to one of the baryonyxes, I noticed it was feeling a little bit under the weather. Not only did it have a sprain, but it was also suffering from the common cold. Ah well, what can you do? Our new Dilophosaurs were behaving themselves, eating, drinking, socialising, just all round being very chill guys. In a rare act of generosity to my guests, I constructed a large hotel as close to the fence as I could possibly get. When fully constructed, the guests would get an exquisite view of any dinosaurs that happened to come nearby, namely our baryonyxes and kentrosaurs, who seemed to occupy this territory for now. For a short while, all was peaceful in the park, emphasis on the short, as soon a fight would emerge between Menace and Ceratops. They both exchanged blows with each other before the Nastuto ran away, and Menace stood his ground in victory. I received a report that a wild baryonyx had been sighted near Oakland, so of course I had to check that out. I dispatched a couple of my scientists and was pleased to see that they were successful in wrangling it in and delivering it to our park, where it would live with the ones that we already housed. I had a look at our financial reports and was pleased to see that our profit was just shy of $1 million per minute. It was good, but it can always be better. In order to improve our profit margins, I was keen to add some more carnivores to our park, and that carnivore would be the Carnotaurus from South America. After a short expedition, my trio of scientists returned with enough fossil samples that I was able to make them up. After some genetic tinkering, I allotted a territory for them with a lake and a goat feeder, as well as some sand for them to bask in. There was panic within the Nasutoceratops herd, as the aptly named Menace managed to find himself in the middle of their territory. One lone Nastuto squared up to Menace, hoping to protect both his territory and herd from this threat. The fight, though, was short. Nasuto really did let the side down with its feeble defense, embarrassing, allowing Menace to find himself another victim to his kill count. The Carnotaurs had now arrived into the park, however their cleverly crafted domain was already occupied. A single Ceratosaur was minding its own business as the South American theropods touched down on soil for the first time. No time was wasted as these two carnivores squared up to each other. Single horn versus double horn. The Carno attacked quickly before the Cerato retaliated. The battle ended though with the Ceratosaur running away and the Carnotaur declaring its dominance over the land. Two of the other Carnotaurs seemed to come to a disagreement however, but it turned out to be more playful than malicious. The losing Ceratosaurus was named Mike. Elsewhere in the park, Menace had abandoned the Nasutoceratops body, leaving it to be claimed by the Compies. After a glance at the map, I was pleased to see that the Dilophosaurs had actually remained in their designated region for now and were behaving themselves. Wanting to satisfy my guests so that my profits could grow even more, restrooms were installed across the park in some areas where they weren't already, but what else could we do to increase profits? More dinosaurs. So I sent some scientists off to the Tagama Beds Formation in Niger in search of the Nigersaurus, Oranosaurus and Suchomimus. I checked back in on the dinosaurs to see that an injured Mike had once again engaged with one of the Carnotaurs. This would turn out to be a fatal mistake for Mike, as the Carnotaur was both faster and stronger. I think it's all fair that we pay our respects to Mike in the comments below by writing RIP Mike. And then the victorious Carnotaurus Maggie, and we now had a new villain of the ecosystem. My expedition team returned from Africa, mainly with some Suchomimus fossils, and as a reward for their hard work, I sent them out again to bring me some more. They duly delivered, even remembering to bring me back some Nigersaur fossils as well this time. It had been far too long though since I'd introduced a new species to the exhibit, so it was time to go shopping again. The Dinosaur Exchange had a nice list of species, but what caught my eye were 5 Stegosaurs for $780,000, an absolute bargain. After the armoured herbivores were bought, I then bred a pack of Proceratosaurs. These small carnivores were one of the earliest known Tyrannosaur species, and perhaps a taster to the guests of what was to come. In a giant exhibit with no boundaries between species, chaos was always brewing. An Nasutoceratops had wandered into the Baryonyx's wetland, and a fight duly ensured. After a lengthy duel where both creatures got 2 hits apiece, it was eventually the Nasutoceratops who slowly limped off from the scene, but gratefully still with its life. Wanting to spread out the new arrivals a bit more, I placed a second hatchery further along the fence. With that, I also lengthened the pathing a bit and added more guest facilities and customized amenities into the area, to not only cater to their every need, but to also diversify the guest experience and hopefully let them view more of their valuable species. I mean, just look at that view. You can just about see some of the exhibit between that mesh wire. It was time for some new arrivals. The miniature sauropods Nigersaurus was next to be added. Known for their large mouths that could hold over 500 teeth, these guys were sure to be one of the more odd-looking dinosaurs in our ecosystem here, but I'm sure our guests will cherish them nonetheless. I spent some time altering the terrain a little, sprucing up the area, but my decorating was interrupted by yet more conflict between the Ceratosaurs and the Carnotaurs. The fight ended in a stalemate, with both parties ending up with major injuries. The Proceratosaurs though seemed to be fitting in very well, and overall Jurassic World the ecosystem was thriving. But peace never lasts long here. The Dilophosaur pack had discovered our new Nigersaurs, and groups of Dilos pounced on our slow-moving herbivore and took many bites into it. The miniature sauropod was near defenseless. All it could do was stomp and shake a little bit to get them off, but the Dilophosaurs were willing to play the long game. Eventually the Nigersaur succumbed to its injuries, and the Dilophosaur pack had a chunky meal as a reward for their tenacity. The two Nigersaurs consoled one another following the loss of their sibling. The feedback from the guests, however, were that they were absolutely loving all these dinosaur fights, so it was time to introduce another carnivore into the ecosystem. Via the exchange this time, 3 Eutyrannuses were airlifted into the exhibit. These feathered theropods were sure to appease the thrill seekers among the guests. To accommodate our new arrivals, I added some water and plant life to their territory, making sure they were happy in their new home. They seemed to appreciate my efforts and seemed to be getting along well another, taking some playful nibbles at each other. With the ecosystem and park expanding, so too did the workload of our scientists. To ensure that our staff were fully up to scratch, more were hired and trained to keep up with the ever-increasing challenging demands that the park will throw at them. It was time though to up the ante, to add some more star attractions and an apex predator or two to our ecosystem. So I dispatched our new highly trained scientists to the Bahara Formation in Egypt in search of the Carcharodontosaurus and Spinosaurus fossils. There are certainties in life: death, taxes, and fighting between our ceratosaurs and carnotaurs. That night, I watched under the moonlight as blows were exchanged before once again the carnotaur stood its ground and the ceratosaur ran off in shame. Will the ceratosaurs finally learn their lesson to not mess with their bihorn neighbours, or will they keep pushing back to claim their land? Stay tuned. The guests, feeling unsafe for some reason, were demanding another shelter to be built. I reluctantly agreed, despite it costing money that was better spent elsewhere. It seemed the Dilophosaurs were either picky eaters or didn't have much of an appetite, and the poor Nigersaur that they had slain was just still lying there, hardly touched, leaving guests mortified at seeing its corpse as they rode along in their gyrospheres. While I was deciding what next to add to the ecosystem, I was pleased to see that the decision had been made for me. I received word that 3 Utahraptors had been spotted nearby, and I knew that I needed to have them. I sent a single scientist over to oversee the capture, and confident that they would get the job done. After a short wait, I was delighted to see that she had succeeded, and the ecosystem now had 3 new feathered additions, which were airlifted into the centre of the enclosure. It appeared that the ceratosaur had not learned its lesson about fighting the Carnotaurus though, as I found it once again trying to square up to one of them. With both specimens carrying an injury, neither were in the best condition for this fight. It certainly seemed as though the Carnotaurus was not ready for this fight at all, as all the hard work and patience finally paid off for the ceratosaur as it finally took down its long-fought enemy and getting partial justice for Mike. Elsewhere in the ecosystem, the Dilophosaur pack was hungry again, targeting another Nigersaur. The sauropod tried to escape, but unfortunately it was slower than VAR making a decision in the Premier League, so there were no problems for the Dilophosaurs in keeping up. All seemed lost for our big-mouthed herbivore as the small predators were tearing into it, but after a single stomp, they seemed to give up, and the Nigersaur lived for yet another day. The ever-growing ecosystem was also meant ever-growing demands for our guests, as more attractions were built, such as a nice little viewing dome in the middle of the exhibit. I got a nice view of a Utahraptor hunting before I was notified that the Dilophosaurs had returned to the Nigersaur hunt. After a short onslaught, this time they were successful, and the sauropod keeled over, proving a feast for the pack. Back in park management mode, and remembering that I did send some scientists off to Egypt, I ordered the extraction of the fossils that were brought back. The ceratosaurs had found themselves in yet another conflict though. This time one of the Utahraptors decided to pick a fight with the horned beast, and this turned out to be as smart as the average Manchester United transfer window, and the ceratosaur took down the Utahraptor in one bite. For a species thought to be one of the smarter dinosaurs, this one didn't show it. With more and more land being claimed by the dinosaurs, it was time to add a new park tour, giving our guests more opportunities to be up close and personal to our dinosaurs. I myself took the very first tour of this new attraction. Back in the dino market, it was time to buy some more small carnivores, and I took a fancy to a pack of Australonovernators. Originating from Australia, believe it or not, these megaraptors were indignantly hauled into the park. No doubt they would quickly like to make a name for themselves after our park helicopters wounded their pride. As you all know here at Jurassic World Ecosystem, I value guest feedback over all else. Noticing that transport rating was low, monorail stations were constructed across the park. Not only would this allow our lazy guests to travel from one end to the other, it also gave high quality aerial views of our ecosystem. As an architectural engineering genius, the monorail tracks fitted seamlessly. I returned to the dino market feeling pretty lucky. I took a gamble on a vendor selling 7 unknown herbivores. The seller had a 98% rating, so I felt confident that I would do something good for $830,000. I did not hesitate to buy and designated an area for these plant eaters to reside in. When I found out that I'd been duped and spent over $800,000 on the 7-gallon mimuses, I punched a hole in my office wall. After hiring a contractor to repair my wall, I was practically foaming at the mouth as I provided the needs for these expensive bin chickens. After building a bunker, I spent the evening unwinding from my expensive blunder by taking a tour on my newly constructed monorail, taking the views of my ecosystem on the elevated track under the orange-hued sunset. I was notified of another fight occurring between carnivores though in the ecosystem. To the surprise of absolutely no one, I discovered that the ceratosaurs were involved yet again, as this time they were taking on one of the Eutyrannuses, almost forgetting that I'd even added these feathered theropods into the park. As usual though, the ceratosaur was biting off more than it could chew, and one headbutt from the Yuti and the cerato ran away with its tail between its legs. Further along the exhibit, I noticed a traffic jam of gyrospheres. It turned out a Dilophosaur had slayed a Proceratosaurus on the gyrosphere track, causing a major inconvenience for some of our guests. Elsewhere, another Proceratosaurus took a page from the Utahraptor's Book of Intelligence by dying of thirst in the middle of a lake. Darwinism at its finest. I ordered a crew to clear the first Proceratosaur's carcass from the gyrosphere track so that the attraction could run smoothly again, before taking control of one of the glass balls myself and rolling around for a little bit. Back in management modes, I sent scientists back to Egypt to retrieve more valuable Carcharodontosaurus and Spinosaurus fossils. But I returned to the tragic news that our iconic Ceratosaurus menace had been killed by a Carnotaurus, ending its reign of terror in the park. Elsewhere though, more chaos was ensuing as a battle of small carnivores was taking place. Australovenator versus a Utahraptor. The fight was brief, with the Utahraptor standing its ground, while the Australovenator walked off with a sprain. Even more carnage though was occurring as the Ceratosaurs went in for round 2 with the Eutyrannuses again, although it appeared to be nothing more than a standoff on this occasion. I received an email that a herd of Euloplocephalases had been spotted in Hamburg, Germany. Feeling that the ecosystem was lacking some armoured herbivores and some impossible to pronounce dinosaur names, I took up the offer to bring them in, sending the same scientists that rescued the Utahraptors to also oversee their capture. The scientists that I had sent to Egypt returned, and I wasted no time in extracting the fossils they had brought me. I returned to the park with the good news that all 4 Euloplocephalases had been captured and were ready to be brought in, so I had them delivered to a nice area with a mix of grasslands, forest, and plenty of water. But those ankylosaurs paled in comparisons to what was next. My scientists now had enough viable genome to clone the Spinosaurus, so I made that their top priority. Looking at my finances, I was now making a profit of nearly $1.2 million a minute, and was frothing at the mouth at thought of what a star dinosaur could do to my bottom line. With my scientists working overtime, it wasn't long before it burst out of the hatchery. Paul Kirby's phone already ingested. With it being the first apex predator in the ecosystem, I had to give it a name that would strike fear in all that came across it. Bob. So with Bob named, I altered the terrain of its immediate territory, providing what it needed for Bob's excessive needs. To complement Bob, I added a large pack of Sigosauruses. These tiny carnivores would act as scavengers, feasting on already dead carcasses and competing in a niche that the compies currently held unrivaled. What's better than one Spinosaurus? 2 Spinosauruses, of course. Just like Bob, this banana-skinned beast burst from the hatchery, though this one hadn't eaten Paul Kirby's phone beforehand. Just like Bob, this one needed a name that would terrify even the tankiest of herbivores. That could only be one name. Dave. Elsewhere in the exhibit, I found one of the Yutis standing over the corpse of its sibling. The official cause of the death was an infected wound, however, I'm convinced that an act of cannibalism may have taken place here. The surviving Eutyrannus was now lonely. Well, maybe it should have thought about that before whacking off its sibling. Rest in peace, Yuti. We were now at the point in the ecosystem where peace was a luxury that was rarely afforded. I got notified that an Australovenator had been killed by a Carnotaur, who sat down in satisfaction beside its kill. Back again in the market, I was keen to replace the depleting numbers within the ecosystem. I bought 4 more Stegosaurs for $1.4 million. After buying 5 of them for less than $800,000 earlier, this one felt a bit more like a rip-off, but I needed the dinosaurs. I watched as they were airlifted in, already looking pretty fed up with their life. Carnage continued across the park. I watched as a Dilophosaurus got absolutely clarted by the club of the Euloplocephalases, but somehow managed to stand up and walk off with only a laceration. Fair play to the lad. At the same time, an Australovenator and Utahraptor were once again at each other's throats, ending in the Utahraptor running for its life. Elsewhere in the park, the ostrich wannabes were mocking me by living the happiest of their lives of any species within the ecosystem. But still, not all dinosaurs were having worn-torn lives, such as this Dryosaurus, Euloplo, and Sagosaurus who were just chilling by the water. I was alerted though that a Dracorex was suffering from a common cold. To make its life easier, I provided for its needs in its immediate area. Get well soon, buddy. The following day, I received some wonderful news from my expedition team. They had returned from North Africa with a motherload of sellable artifacts, namely dinosaur fossils and bird eggs. I auctioned them off and made an income of $1.4 million. Absolute stonks. After that excitement, I remembered why I'd sent the dig team out in the first place, for Carcharodontosaurus fossils. I had those extracted, and it wasn't long before the sharp-toothed lizard was ready to be introduced to our ecosystem. 2 of them were bred, and they were introduced, and there was a fantastic view of the tree as they emerged. Would they compete with the African rivals in the Spinosaurus, or would they find their own territory to rule over? We will soon find out. Once the Carch were housed, I took advantage of this rare calm within the ecosystem, as for once the dinos went at each other's throats, taking in the natural beauty which I and my scientists have managed to bring back from extinction. But as we all know, this calm would only be fleeting. I was alerted to an escape attempt from a Utahraptor. It seemed that the idea that these raptors were smart was a pure myth though. It had an entire island to itself, and it still tried to get out. I'm not quite sure what more it wants. As expected, and to the elation of our guests, it wasn't long before our 2 large carnivores were squaring up next to each other. With both the Carcharodontosaurus and Bob wishing to lay claim to its land and feeling victimised at each other's presence, it was only going to be so long before blood was shed. But after some pointless back and forth between the 2 theropods, where no winner was decided and no blood was actually shed, it was our guests, who had been promised entertainment, who felt like the victimised ones. Elsewhere, the other Carch and Dave were also having a dispute of their own. However, this one ended with no clear victor. Following these fights, I named one of the Carches Violet. Following that excitement, I began making preparations to bring another famous name into the park, the Allosaurus. The fossils of this pack-hunting Jurassic carnivore would be found in the southern United States, so I sent some of my scientists to go digging there, and they returned to me a short while later, bringing back not only the fossils I requested, but also a pair of aquatic plant fossils to sell, bringing back a nice return on the investment. Back in the ecosystem, it was round 2 between our North African carnivores. This time it was Dave taking on the unnamed yet Carch. It was Dave who struck first, taking what looked to be a nasty bite at the Carch, who appeared quite bloody afterwards. The Carch bit back, though not as hard, and realising that this was not a fight that it could win, the Carch ran off, leaving Dave as the victor. After that distraction, it was back to the Allosaurs, where a pack of 3 were introduced to our ecosystem. But our guests didn't get a chance to appreciate our new arrivals enough, as Violet the Carcharodontosaurus had escaped and was rampaging through our guest areas. Panicking at what an incident could do to my bottom line, and being woefully unprepared for such a scenario, a response facility was quickly constructed and sent to deal with Violet's nonsense. I was notified that the other Carch might also be a threat, so I ordered the response team to tranquilise that as well. Sensing the rising temperatures in the ecosystem, a Carnotaur decided to square up against Bob, but smartly decided against it in the end. Elsewhere, the Utahraptor was still trying to escape and get to our guests, but was seemingly no match for our structural engineers who built the fence. With it being the last of its pack that I had originally rescued from the wild, I named it Lonely, and watched as it walked off, defeated by the metal fence and feeling rather sorry for itself. Despite all the chaos that was going on around me, I decided that it was time for another apex carnivore in the ecosystem. So I dispatched my dig team off to Argentina, in search of fossil samples for one of the largest known carnivorous dinosaurs, Giganotosaurus, which was sure to bring in the big bucks. With Gigas on my mind, I entered the dinosaur market and brought a pair of Gigantoraptors from the British Underground for $1.3 million. Why this British seller is demanding American dollars is beyond me. I had them airlifted into the centre of the ecosystem, only to find that one of them was suffering from silicosis, which it got from a sandstorm. Again, how it got that in the United Kingdom is also beyond me. Things were not looking good for our Carcharodontosaurus though. I found the unnamed Carch in a fight with a Carno. In a real David and Goliath story, the Carnotaur won, and the Carch ran off, leaving its pride at an all-time low. Feeling now that they were invincible, another Carnotaur decided to pick a fight with a Utahraptor. It took the talk and then walked the walk, taking down the Ut in a single hit. Is there now a new apex in the ecosystem? The Carno stood over its victim for a moment, aura farming, before walking off, killing for sport rather than food. That night, the final Ut ate from a corpse. An Allosaur killed a Euphocephalus, and the Gigantoraptors were repeatedly kicking each other, vying for dominance. Eventually, the fight had to be manually broken up by the response team, as one of the giant birds had suffered a major fracture. Stupid bird. Once the giant chicken fight had been neutralised, I had been notified of another fight between one of our large carnivores. I arrived just in time to see the short and miserable life of our nameless Carcharodontosaurus come to an end, taking on one too many battles that it simply couldn't win. The victorious Allosaurus celebrated its victory with a tail slam onto one of our park tour vehicles, breaking it off completely and no doubt traumatising the passengers of said tour. I named the Allosaur Bravo and watched as it ate from the body of our fallen Karch. I took a brief intermission from Bravo to see Lonely picking up and eating one of our compies. At least it was no longer interested in the fence. I returned to Bravo to see that he was becoming quite a nuisance for our tour vehicles, deciding that the tracks would be a perfect place for him to rest. Eventually he stood and looked like he moved on, but not before brushing his tail against the side of the car, knocking it off course. Seeing that as a personal attack, Bravo then turned aggressive against the vehicle, giving a violent tail swipe before a forceful headbutt. Our driver, for her part, was doing an excellent job at keeping her composure. With Bravo's back turned and the car only missing a door and suffering a slight dent, they made an escape attempt back onto the track, but were somehow being dragged away by Bravo still. A second tour vehicle had caught up, but stopped just before the incident, unsure on how to safely proceed. But Bravo was not done yet. He turned around and gave a full charge at the first vehicle, sending it spinning into the air before landing upright again. I could only watch in horror, not for the safety of my guests, but for fear of my bank balance, with all these impending lawsuits. Bravo screamed at the second car, but thankfully lost interest and turned around to leave. I checked on the guests in both cars, but they all seemed rather unfazed. I'm not sure they even noticed. The tour vehicles were not quite out of the woods yet, however, as a lone Dilophosaur did spit its venom at them, but no further harm was done. I can see why our guests love our park. Away from that chaos, back into the dull simplicity of my admin work, my scientists had returned from Argentina with valuable Giganotosaurus fossils. But just as I ordered for them to be extracted, I had been notified that Bob had broken out of the ecosystem into the guest areas. The response team could not get the situation contained before Bob ate one of our construction workers, swallowing his phone in the process. Another day, another lawsuit, but at least we have Paul Kirby's ringtone again. And I long since accepted that the fact that the extended periods of peace we're managing this park were in the past now. I continue to follow the journey of Lonely, the last Utah raptor, watching as it killed more small creatures, a lone Proceratosaurus becoming its latest victim. But was once again dragged away to find out that this time one of the Utahranases had broken out. This time, however, our response team did manage to tranquilize it before it managed to reach any of our guests or workers. What a well-behaved Uti. After killing one already, our fearless Carnotaurs, who had more scales than brain cells, fancied bringing the Carcharodontosaurus back to extinction. Violet was the target this time, who was looking to avenge its fallen sibling. The fight began, and the Carno landed the first hit, before Violet struck back. This time, however, it was the Carno who fled, letting Violet roar in victory, having claimed this land for herself. It had been a while since our ecosystem had received some new arrivals. It was time to rectify that. With a batch already synthesized, I ordered the incubation of 2 Giganotosauruses for a hefty price of $3.4 million. For that price, these giant carnivores from South America were sure to be popular among the guests. Whilst the Gigas were incubating, I returned to the dinosaur market and added 2 new small stegosaurs from China, the Chongqingosaurus. With the recent arrivals at the ecosystem being quite carnivore heavy, I decided it was time to mix things up a bit, if nothing more than to provide a meal for said carnivores. But it seemed as though the Chongqingosauruses were not popular enough with the guests, nor were they with the higher-ups. So I went back into the market and returned the tried and true, big ones with sharp teeth. I bought a pair of Tarbosauruses for $2.7 million. Tarbosaurus was a close relative of the Tyrannosaurus rex, and hopefully these carnivores would be popular enough with the guests, who couldn't tell the difference between the two species. They were airlifted in with no grace or poise whatsoever, and began life in their new home. Our brainless Carnotaur decided it was time to move away from the Karks and instead pick a fight with Bob, the Spinosaurus. When I tuned in, I was surprised to see the Carno putting up once more a strong performance, headbutting Bob mid-roar. The Carnotaur then casually walked off, leaving Bob raging with its opponent. Elsewhere in the park, it was a rude welcoming for one of our Chongqingosauruses, as it was killed in one bite by an Allosaurus. Rest in peace, we hardly knew you, Chongqingy. Back again at the Dinosaur Exchange, and back again with more carnivores. This time, I was shopping for some more eggs instead of live specimens. I brought 6 Deinonychus eggs for $722,000. I had them arrive in the hatchery and ordered my scientists to oversee their incubation. Our Giganotosaurs were now in the park and meandering their way through the ecosystem, strolling past a Eolotlocephalus, likely not even noticing it was there. I decided to follow them in my own personal gyrosphere, getting as close as I could, watching one of them eat from a feeder, a once-in-a-lifetime view. Back to park management, our Deinonychus pack had been raised to maturity and were now ready to be released. These walking tadpoles will cause problems for any prey they collectively set their eyes on. As per usual, chaos was ensuring all over the park. One of the Allosaurs had picked a fight with Dave, and to be fair to it, it was holding its own against a much larger opponent until it began suffering from internal bleeding and fled. Our Utyrannus had managed to escape again, but it had been dealt with by our response team. And our giant chickens were still attacking each other for dominance. Not sure what these things really do. Now, remember when I said the tadpoles would be a problem for their prey? Well, it was for the Amargasaurus, who found that out the hard way, with multiple Deinonychuses jumping on at the same time. They effortlessly took down this small sauropod and had their first meal to enjoy since their release. But now, I bring some sad news. Lonely the Utahraptor is no more. Killed after trying to fight Violet the Carcharodontosaurus. Darwinism is all I can say. Elsewhere in the Stegosaurus territory, an encroaching Baryonyx was effortlessly taken down, rest in peace Barry. And then a Tarbosaur ran through screaming, not entirely sure what its game plan was there. After all that carnage, I went back to my safe place, the dinosaur market. I noticed that 5 oviraptors were for sale from the French authorities for just shy of $400,000. It was an offer that I just couldn't turn down. I had them airlifted into the enclosure, knowing that they would likely raid some nests and search for some eggs. Life was progressing in the ecosystem. A Tarbosaurus snacked on a Dracorex, and my medical team was sent out to deal with a Gigantoraptor's infected wound. And the Allosaurus who fought with Dave was now fully healed from its internal bleeding and was returned to its pack thanks to my generosity. All was well, but this was just the calm before the storm. The Scorpios Rex, the first ever genetically modified hybrid, but deemed too deformed and unstable to be fit for Jurassic World. Well, not for my Jurassic World. My scientists have managed to gather its genetic material and clone one for our park. With its highly aggressive nature, venomous quills and unpredictable movements, this hybrid is guaranteed to rustle some feathers in our ecosystem. I decided to name it Darren, and I was sure to keep a close eye on him from here on out. As I ordered my scientists to clear up the clutter in the lab and sent a dig team out to the US, I received word that we were now making over $1.2 million a minute. I truly am an exceptional businessman. I noticed that my guest satisfaction could still be improved further, so I added a new shelter, bathroom, and a new viewing tower in the middle of our ecosystem. The mood though in the ecosystem had shifted. Darren had caused an imbalance within our natural hierarchy, and the dinosaurs could sense it. Our carnivores had turned on one another, our spinosaurs had been reduced to hunting small prey, fences were being broken left, right and centre, and our tadpoles were attacking Baryonyxes. Chaos was ensuing all over the park, as I caught one of our gigas Kev taking its anger out on one of our medical vehicles, and an Allosaur brutally slaughtering a Euloplocephalus. My dig team had returned with both Ankylosaurus fossils and, more significantly, Tyrannosaurus rex fossils. Both of these dinosaurs would be heavy hitters, both in a literal sense and in terms of popularity for our guests. I made sure that the dig team returned to the same site to gather more valuable genetic material for me. I returned to the ecosystem to find out that one of our Giganotosaurs had been hunted down and killed by another one of our apex carnivores, the Tarbosaurus. I named the victorious Tarbosaur who was basking in its victory, Venom. I checked in on Darren, who for the time being was just wandering around the ecosystem on its own, being a chill guy, but no doubt plotting something big in the coming days to come. Bob had now encountered the Allosaur pack and had picked its target. The two dueled, exchanging bites and headbutts, but it was the Allosaurus who fled, while Bob stood his ground, victorious though not completely unscathed. I sent my scientists back to the expedition in the Hell Creek Formation C dig site to exclusively look now for Tyrannosaurus rex fossils. More battles were commencing in the ecosystem though, and this time it was time for a rather mismatched brawl between Kev and the Baryonyx. It was an easy fight for Kev as he effortlessly took down the British Piscivore. But Big Kev was not wasting any time, as he saw a chance to avenge its fallen sibling. It spotted a Tarbosaur and squared up to it. A quick screaming contest was exchanged before Kev, not wanting to be consumed by vengeance, took the moral high ground and walked away. How very anticlimactic. T-Rex fossils had now returned from the States, but as they were being extracted, I was alerted of yet another fence break. Shaken up by its encounter with Kev, the Tarbosaurus had broken out and had begun to terrorise our guests. Unfortunately, this Tarbosaur actually managed to eat one of them before the response unit could trank it. Potential for another PR disaster, but it's fine, we'll just deny it and call it fake news. Before the fence could get repaired, I spotted one of our Deinonychus phase through solid metal. I still have no explanation to this for this day. I watched as the last living Utahraptor somehow managed to lose a fight to the Dilophosaur, and thus the least intelligent pack of Utahraptors are now once again extinct. They were completely stoppable on their day, and the streets will forget what they did for this ecosystem. To twist the popular phrase, when one feathered raptor species dies out, another one appears. I was notified that a pack of 3 pyroraptors had been spotted near the British capital, so off went one of my scientists to oversee the capture, and perhaps bring me back a souvenir from Fortnum and Mason. There was a brief skirmish between Darren and one of our fearless carnotaurs, but the carnid smartly decided to run away, but however, the damage in this case had already been inflicted. The carnotaur had been stung by one of Darren's venomous quills and was slowly losing health. Will its immune system fight back, or will it succumb? Only time would tell. I received the rather disappointing news that my scientist was only able to bring back 2 out of the 3 pyroraptors. No doubt he got distracted by all that sightseeing. Anyway, I had the duo of pyroraptors airlifted in, but these pyroraptors weren't the only new arrivals, however. 2 of the most iconic dinosaurs of all time, the Tyrant Lizard King, was now in our ecosystem. And one of them wasted no time in getting stuck in to Maggie the Carnotaur, claiming its territory and giving a victory war. I decided to name them Goblin and Hobgoblin. I watched as Maggie struggled with organ trauma as a result of the battle. Elsewhere, the Carnotaur who fought Darren was now at death's door. I did try to rush our medical team to get to it, but it was too late. The poison was too strong, and Darren had claimed his first victory. As I watched Darren eat and rest, evidently showing no guilt or remorse for what it had done, I knew that he was going to be trouble. Taking a break from inflicting organ trauma, our Rexes were at each other's throats in a fight for dominance. It was clear that Hobgoblin was the stronger Rex and proved it by winning the battle, leaving Goblin to run away, but still alive and at least with no major injuries. I returned once more to the dinosaur market, where I saw a Dino-Kairos for sale at a bargain price of $864,000. There was a flip side, however, with the seller being notoriously unreliable and likely providing unreliable information. As a gambling man, I bought it anyway. Our new duck-billed piscivore was covered in brown, orange and cream feathers. What it also had was silicosis. Honestly, do these sellers even look after these dinosaurs? I'm not so sure. I myself will take great care of this Dino-Kairos though, as evidenced by me placing it right next to Bob the Spinosaurus. Darren was once again back causing trouble in our ecosystem, this time fighting one of our Allosauruses. This fight did not go, however, how the Scorpios wanted it to go, as it ran away with its tail between its legs, not managing to land a single venomous quill on the Allosaur. With the Rexes in the park, I sent my expedition team to focus entirely on the Ankylosaurus fossils. After spending a nauseating $1.6 million to send my scientists there, I was certainly hoping for exceptional results. My park rangers had informed me that a battle of the Tyrannosaurids was taking place. Tarbosaurus versus Utaranus. The Tarbosaur had the size and the bulk, though the Uti likely had the speed and agility on its side. Though in the end, size does indeed matter most. Rest in peace, our troublesome Uti. For an extortionate $1.6 million, our scientists only managed to recover 3 Ankylosaurus fossils. It wasn't a great return, but it was good enough, as we now had enough genetic material to clone our very own. After getting distracted by Darren brutally hunting down the Dryosaur, I ordered my scientists to get the Ankylosaurus batch ready for ecosystem release. After a short wait, I bred 3 of them in total, all armoured to the teeth, but this was just the beginning. I decided that there wasn't quite enough violence in this ecosystem, so I decided to clone an Indominus Rex. Henry Wu's first successful hybrid, and the animal that took down the original Jurassic World, was soon to be introduced. After watching that deformed first attempt at a hybrid take down a bin chicken, I was sure that some competition for our top dog was needed. The sun had set, and nighttime had begun. Bob fancied himself a late night meal, taking down a Stegosaurus to fulfill his hunger. The fight was even until the Stegosaur ran away for its life, leaving Bob with an empty stomach, screaming at the cowardly herbivore. But now, ladies and gentlemen, the greatest predator to ever walk this earth, the ultimate killing machine, the Indominus Rex had been raised to maturity and was ready to be released into our ecosystem. Possessing a bulky frame, long sharp claws and the ability to camouflage, it would be a terrifying sight for just about any creature it came across. In honour of a channel legend, I named it Darwin. But will it be like Charles and become the cream of the crop, or like Nunez and flop in embarrassment? Only time will tell. One of our new Ankylosaurs was given a very generous gift on their first night, and by that I mean a leg to break. One of our Allosaurs challenged our new herbivores, and the two fought under the stars. But I was soon whisked away, as it was a night of deadly violence, as one of our unhinged Carnotaurs was fighting a Gigantoraptor at the very same time. The Carnotaur came out victorious, but decided that it didn't like that many feathers in its food. It was a bad night overall for our Stegosaurs though, as I watched one of them die at the mouth of Kev, while I found another one had become the first victim of Darwin, who I found dangerously wandering close to the ecosystem's fence. Elsewhere in our night of death, one of our Allosaurs was brutally taken down by none other than Dave. With such a tragic number of casualties overnight, it was up to me to replenish our numbers. Originating in what is today's Mongolia, the Therizinosaurus was one of the most unique dinosaurs ever found. Boasting claws that could reach up to a meter in length, the Therizinosaurus was the dinosaur that inspired the character of Freddy Krueger. I've completely made that up, by the way. This bipedal herbivore was sure to be able to know how to defend itself against the many carnivores of our ecosystem. And to let everyone know how tough it is, I named it Fluffy. Also arriving were a pack of Canadian Atrociraptors. As their name suggests, these dromaeosaurs would be no pushover if they worked together in a group. As the sun rose, I watched Darwin eat a small snack, discover the corpse of a Gigantoraptor, and watch Fluffy defend himself against Hobgoblin. Darren was eating something, and the Ankylosaurs were kicking up a fuss, wanting more leaves and fruit in their territory. Though they weren't causing as much of a fuss as Bob was, who managed to break in the ecosystem's fence. Bob proceeded to cause some temporary chaos for our guests, trampling all over them before giving them the fright of their lives by collapsing right in front of them. As predicted, Darwin had established himself as the apex predator of our ecosystem, killing Darren in a fight, putting an end to our asthmatic bipedal pug's reign of poison. Most impressive for Darwin, though, is that he didn't actually manage to take any poison damage from Darren's quills. It was a clean job from Charles. Our Atrociraptors wasted no time in getting themselves stuck in, latching themselves onto a Tarbosaur. After some struggling, and despite its best efforts, the Tyrannosaurid succumbed to its wounds, and the raptors had themselves a hefty first meal. Not finished there, however, one of them needlessly took out a lone Dilophosaur who was just minding its own business. I was notified, though, of yet more breakouts in the ecosystem. Bravo the Allosaurus felt outraged at life and decided to take it out on our paying guests. But not only that, Dave the Spinosaurus had also managed to escape, terrorizing our park visitors, no doubt giving them trauma for life. At this point, I just want to remind everyone that no therapy fees are to be paid for by Jurassic World Ecosystem, and instead will be paid fully by the guests who decide to take up on that option. Things were going from bad to worse though for our guests, as Darwin was also loose and roaming through our park facilities. After a short while though, Dave was captured, as was Darwin, proving that my security team is better than that clown show at Jurassic World. Instead of delivering Darwin back into the ecosystem though, I instead took him to the vets, as it was suffering from a major injury. While it was being transported, I'm sure it would appreciate that we didn't let it lose its dignity. All was well once again. But for how long? Apparently not for very long at all, as our Allosaurs and Spinosaurs were back at it again. This fight didn't end in any casualties, and both went their own ways, though the Allosaur was looking significantly more damaged than the Spino. I received word that the gamblers and partygoers in Las Vegas had invited free Amargasaurs to their shenanigans. I was given the opportunity to rescue them, which I of course accepted. From gambling sauropods to genetically modified monsters, I decided to clone an Indoraptor to give some competition to Darwin, after Darwin provided no challenge whatsoever. Soon, Indy Kayla was introduced to the ecosystem, and feeling confident on his first night, Indy took on an Ankylosaurus. It appears his confidence was warranted, as the Ank fell with no problem at all. Indy was not done there though, as it attacked one of our new Amargasaurs who had just come back from Vegas. It seemed the sauropod had run out of aces, and it fell down with little retaliation. Just what had I released into this ecosystem? On the very same day, I have some more tragic news to report. Bravo the Allosaur, the park tour's main attraction, had sadly lost in a fight to Hobgoblin and did not survive the encounter. Rest in peace, big guy. But the surprising loss that night was Darwin, who had had its neck snapped by Bob. This turned out to be Bob's first kill in a fight, showing that it's all about the quality rather than the quantity. Unfortunately, this was not a motto that Indy Kayla subscribed to. I found out that all three of our party-loving Amargasaurs had actually been killed by the Indoraptor. And while most people have a calming, supportive talk with their gambling-addicted friends, Indy decided to put them out of their misery. Here at Jurassic World Ecosystem, our interventions are much more extreme. Speaking of our little menace, he was in the middle of a battle with an Allosaur, which he effortlessly won. This guy was definitely going to be a problem for the dinosaurs in our ecosystem. Checking in on a few of our dinosaurs, our Dinosaur seemed to be hating life as one of our Gigas easily killed a Chongqingosaurus, and Indy was continuing his rampage by butchering one of our Pyroraptors, taking its total kill count up to 6 already. Dave was angry at life and trying to break free, while our Rexes were taking a relaxing dip in one of the lakes. This peaceful meandering was interrupted though by Violet the Carcharodontosaurus, who had been feeling rather directionless since its sibling's death all that time ago. It was Goblin who decided to take up Violet's challenge this time. The fight was relatively even, but it was Goblin who ended up holding its ground, while Violet left the scene. Watching that fight though was Dave, who charged onto the scene wanting to take on Hobgoblin, who accepted the chance to prove itself. It was a Spinosaurus versus T-Rex, the iconic Jurassic Park 3 matchup. The two merely stared each other down before Hobgoblin started the fight, landing a strong hit on Dave. And unlike Jurassic Park 3, it was the Tyrannosaurus who triumphed over the Spinosaur, landing a crushing and decisive bite on Dave's neck, ending Dave's reign of chaos. And with that, I decided to bring my time running this ecosystem to an end, handing over the reins to someone else. As I watched some of my dinosaurs for the last time, relaxing, stalking their prey, or looking worse for wear, I looked back at what I had created. Was Jurassic World ecosystem a financial success? Yes, majorly so. Was it ethical? Not in the slightest. But did our guests enjoy it? Most of them did, but maybe not the ones that were terrorised by Bravo or ran over by Darwin. In an ecosystem where carnivores ruled supreme, the Carnotaurs were fearless, and the hybrids ran amok, the Tyrannosaurs were still the rightful kings, taking Violet down right at the end. Thank you all so much for watching my latest video. Remember, if you do enjoy my videos, consider becoming a member of the Rampy channel here on YouTube to get early access, or supporting me over on Patreon. If you have enjoyed, remember to leave a like, and if you haven't subscribed, of course, why not do that as well? Also, YouTube thinks that you will love the video on screen now, so why not give it a watch? Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you guys in the next one.